Hi everybody. Hi everybody. This is my short commentary on the first lecture to Rudolf Steiner's lecture cycle, Foundations of Esotericism. This lecture cycle was given after he had written his book, Christianity as the Mystical Fact, but also before he started teaching intensively about the commentary on the Christian teachings. In this lecture cycle, we find that he is instructing a small group of esoteric students in Berlin. He was asked to do so by Marie von Sivers to start an esoteric group in the Theosophical Society, and these 31 lectures are his first introduction to that group. And we discover that there are some interesting themes that he develops. As we go through the lecture cycle, we will also see that we will need to work out the parlance between the Western and the Eastern esoteric terminology, which will be an interesting challenge for us to find our own relationship to these things. In the first lecture, we discover that Steiner is already approaching an interesting approach to evolution. So he says that the most important thing for us to understand about evolution is that there are 7 stages of human evolution, of human consciousness. He goes through these very quickly: the trance consciousness, the deep sleep consciousness, the dream consciousness, the waking consciousness, which we are now developing, and then into the future, the psychic, the super psychic, and the spiritual consciousness. And there are big cycles of time, as we will discover, where each of these layers of consciousness develop. As we develop a new layer of consciousness, of course, we take the old layer of consciousness with us. We don't lose it, but we work with it. So at this point, we have a trance consciousness, a deep sleep consciousness, a dream consciousness, and a waking consciousness. And the other 3 are in a future form, will come to us. In fact, he says there are 12 stages of consciousness, but the higher 5 are devoted or contained or held by the creator gods. But in contrast, we could say, to Darwinistic or mainstream kind of thinking about evolution, Steiner says that we are related to the animals and the plants and the stones in a different way than rising up from the simplest forms, but that as we go through different stages of consciousness, that which we are developing within ourselves has to create an inner space whereby we also then have pushed out certain things of us. An example he brings is that the snake is a part of us in as much as it is part of our spinal column. And what we can develop through our spinal column, the snake represents to us. As we go through the lectures, we'll see that also later on we are to take back, through our relationship to the snake, that which is ennobled in us through relating to these creatures and to plants and to the stones. As we look at nature around us as well, we also see that they have a consciousness themselves, that the cosmic consciousness can also perceive through the world of creation. This is a very exciting part of Rudolf Steiner's development of evolution. I'm trying to look at some of the pages to bring my things, but he talks about that in the earth organism, the invertebrate animals are somewhat similar to the eye and the ear in the human being, that for the cosmic consciousness, the invertebrate animals provide an eye and an ear for the cosmic powers to be able to be listening to us. He also then talks a little bit about how we will need to develop in the future, to talk about further stages of consciousness, and starts to begin a process through which we will develop in the next lectures, but that the human being will also need to develop a threefold relationship to the functions of our brain. So the forebrain, the middle brain, and the back part of our brain, where our thinking and our feeling and our willing are contained. And we will slowly but surely find 3 independent parts of our brain that we will have to, through our consciousness, bring into relationship with each other as we are developing. And so I can see that a few people are actually watching as I'm speaking. Hi to everybody. Hope that this introduction to these lectures as we work together will be helpful. But this first lecture, as I've said, is an introduction to another approach to the pictures of evolution, how the human being and creation have evolved together, and our interrelationship between what evolves in the human being of consciousness and what evolves in the world around us as our consciousness evolves between the various forms, and how the cosmic consciousness can then find a relationship to us. So we could say there are three sorts of interrelationships between human consciousness, the consciousness of creation around us, and the cosmic consciousness. They are all interrelated, but the world around us is part of the human being, and therefore what the human being thinks and does and how we relate to relationship is all part of the evolving consciousness that we have as human beings. So I hope that gives you some thoughts to be able to reread the lecture if you managed to read it yesterday or today. Maybe tomorrow we will move on to reading. I'll post a link to the second lecture and we'll see how this develops. But for today, consider that there are these 7 stages of consciousness, which in our present time we carry 4: the trance-like, the deep sleep, the dream-like sleep, and the waking consciousness. 3 future stages of consciousness are still to develop within us: a psychic, a super-psychic, and a spiritual consciousness, and that there are 5 higher layers of consciousness above which the cosmic powers, who are the forces that form the world around us, are containing for us, and which towards we must evolve in the future. Interesting introduction to a schooling about understanding the world in a more esoteric sense. Esoteric, by the way, doesn't mean strange things. The esoteric means that it is the inside knowledge of an outer knowledge. So you have exoteric knowledge and esoteric knowledge. There are 2 halves of knowledge. So we have knowledge of the exoteric world, which we call physical science. But there is also an esoteric side to things, which is more the hidden knowledge, the hidden wisdom that we have in a way lost our connection to. I often say we have forgotten what we have forgotten, and we need to begin to remember. And this is part of the schooling that Rudolf Steiner brings for us. So as we go, we will see that there are some interesting things for us to ponder. As I said, this may challenge some of our philosophical premises that we work with. Here is one in today's lecture, that the evolution of the world around us doesn't evolve from the simplest life forms to the more complex, with consciousness being the end product, but that consciousness is always the starting point of evolution, and that as consciousness evolves, so the differentiation between species evolves, and therefore we have a deep, responsible connection to the world around us. The trees, the animals, and the stones around us are part of one collective organism, which we call our home, the earth, and therefore have a great responsibility for ourselves to work towards. This was a great part of the contribution, that we have the exoteric earth, but we also have then the deep inner connections of life between things, and what we do with our consciousness as human beings has an impact upon the physical and the material and the life world around us, including then the consciousness. Okay, well, that's it for the evening. I hope this posts well, and I'll be back on Wednesday with a comment on lecture 2. Thanks, bye.